Lynch speaks on San Francisco 49ers quarterback competition. Is it a quarterback competition? When Brock Purdy comes back, he is the leader in the clubhouse. Brock Purdy, QB1, but he's hurt. What about Sam Darnold and Trey Lance? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we got some good stuff here from the owners' meetings, Croc. John Lynch meeting with reporters and dropping a little bit of a bomb. And look, by the way, thanks everybody who's jumping in on this live midday episode. We're kind of busy weekend and things got changed around. So we're doing a little Monday afternoon podcast for you here. Rick in the chat says, don't know why people on Twitter are making such a big deal about what Lynch said. Makes sense stating facts. And I think when you hear him crown, which is the way a lot of people are putting it, he said Brock Purdy earned it to be the leader in the clubhouse. And that Brock Purdy, so it sounds like Brock Purdy, if they're filling out a depth chart, is quarterback one. But obviously he's hurt. And we'll talk a little bit more about Brock Purdy and his timeline and some of those things. But I think the biggest thing that he said out of all of this, Croc, was that Brock Purdy is the leader in the clubhouse. We've heard it from players. We've seen it ourselves and had a feeling that that's the way it would go. But now we heard it from the general manager and John Lynch saying that it's Brock Purdy's job to lose. But there's a lot of time between now and when Brock Purdy can be cleared to play. Is that even enough time for anybody to jump in front of Brock Purdy on that depth chart?
Nah, man. I mean, and we've talked about this part of it before. I don't think that there's anyone on this roster, whether it's Trey Lance or Sam Darnold, can do to unseat what Brock Purdy did down the stretch for the 49ers, right? So you talked about the players and kind of being the leader in the clubhouse. They talked about kind of that assertiveness that he has on the field. I think that kind of has spread throughout the locker room with how they feel about him and what he's ready for. So when it comes to him kind of being that leader, I think he just naturally or has learned that, from years of experience of being a starter, how to kind of, deal with this whole entire situation and kind of demand a certain level of, excellence, I guess you could say, or professionalism from the rest of his guys, whether it's during practice or during the games. And the way he stepped in the games and then played at a high level most of the games, I think that's what players are really getting behind. So when it comes to being the leader, a lot of it is, man, we done been through some stuff with this guy. I think that's why they're behind Jimmy Garoppolo a lot, and I think that's why they're behind Brock Purdy as well.
I mean, the way he played, we talked about it at the time. It was the best quarterback play we've seen under Kyle Shanahan, and it was pretty remarkable what Brock Purdy was doing there. Coming off of the injury, though, it's a little bit dangerous, I'd say, for John Lynch to say that because now the expectation is that Brock Purdy's going to get his job back.
No matter what.
And he doesn't have an opportunity to compete with Trey Lance and Sam Darnold as well this offseason. So as it pertains to Brock Purdy, now you're putting an expectation that he earned the job, that he's going to come back 100%. He's going to get cleared. And John Lynch said they hope it's going to be during training camp. There's some hope there, but he said they're going to do right by Brock Purdy and the organization to make sure everything is done in a smart way with him, but they'll be aggressive when they have to, and they'll know more around that 12-week mark, which is what we'd always heard about. After 3 months, you could start throwing. And so we'll see what happens between starting to throw after 12 weeks, if that doesn't, happen, and we'll hear about him throwing after 12 weeks, after 12 weeks, I'm sure, then we'll know that he's on track at least. And then, between then and the start of training camp, where Trey Lance is at will be a huge factor there. But if he can't compete and he's not ready to really practice at all throughout camp and preseason, it would be that's a pretty wild. As well as he played, Croc, it's really hard to expect Trey Lance to come in and start for you when he's ready if he doesn't get a training camp. And so that's the part to me that that's hard to wrap my head around, because this isn't a 4-year veteran where you've seen him play all these games and, he's been around the league, and he played 7-8 games. And as good as he played, they've got a lot invested with some other quarterbacks on their roster. So, and they won't be able to see Purdy at all spring long and probably most of the summer. So it's a huge difference playing even one preseason game and being cleared at some point before 6 months. But if he's not cleared until 6 months, that's the part. It's like, okay, he's quarterback one. So unless somebody does something amazing, he's ready, he's cleared, he's the quarterback. And that's where it gets dicey for me.
I'm a little conflicted with that, because just with that whole, throwing that out there, because I like the fact that they're getting behind a de facto quarterback, right? It's like, hey, this is our quarterback. Essentially, that's what they're saying. Now, they say it, but then they contradict it by saying, well, there is a competition. We see Rick Torres in the chat right now saying competition. He did say that there's a competition. So that's the part that's truly hard to understand exactly what's going on with some of the things that John Lynch said. Well, yeah, hey, he's the leader in the clubhouse. I think ultimately, and I try not to nitpick at every single thing that he says there, because first of all, we talk live for a living. We understand how sometimes you can say something and it might get construed as something else, and we meant to say this, but now we got too deep into it and we can't go back and kind of fix what we said maybe a few minutes ago when we meant to say something else. But he did say some things like, oh, he's probably going to be the starter, and there's going to be a competition, but he is a leader in the clubhouse. He also mentioned how, if all things created equal, he would get first team snaps. He'd be the guy first. So I think that's the hard part there, where you're saying it's his job to lose, but it's a competition, but then it's kind of not, because how guys are behind him. And it just really adds to this entire kind of weird dynamic that the 49ers have. And the only way to get rid of it, and we talked about it even with Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, you got to get rid of one of the guys. They're not going to get rid of Purdy. If you get rid of Trey Lance, then it just makes it very clear, hey, this is the guy. But the dancing around it and saying that it's still kind of open for Trey Lance, because again, if Trey Lance, and this would be tough, but if Trey Lance comes in and just, wow, he's getting it. Wow, like, look at this throw. Then you start seeing the special things that he can do. Make play with his legs. And it starts to look like this is a higher level. But, oh, man, we haven't really seen it over a stretch of games or in the playoffs or in the trenches with some of these guys. Now, what do you do with that? So that's the part where, again, it's a slippery slope, especially saying those things when Brock Purdy can't really go out there and be live from the jump. It's tough.
I do agree that, and the old saying that when you have two quarterbacks, you have none, I do agree with that. So in a lot of ways, it's more beneficial for the organization to be behind a guy and know that they like a guy and be like, he's the starter. This is the best guy we've had. Brock Purdy is the best guy. And so that does make some sense and brings.
Well, but if you do that, then you can't say it's a competition.
Right. And I think actually the competition part of what he said was taken out of context a little bit, because he wasn't like, oh, this is an open competition and whoever plays the best for 4 weeks in August is going to be the starter. He was like, yeah, he basically said, Brock Purdy's the leader in the clubhouse. We still like Trey Lance. He hasn't had much of an opportunity yet, and we're excited where he's at, and we'll see what that looks like. And then he's like, and then he was asked again about Sam Darnold, and he's like, and Sam Darnold's competing too. So he used the word competing, but he didn't really say it like
there's a competition,
straight up competition. So basically, basically the way I read it from John Lynch is that it was pretty obvious and pretty clear that if everybody's healthy and he was filling out a depth chart, it's Brock Purdy 1, Trey Lance 2, Sam Darnold 3. And Sam Darnold is the safety net veteran quarterback. He didn't get paid a lot of money. He didn't even get paid regular backup quarterback money. There's some guarantees there for him, but there's a chance that Sam Darnold doesn't even make the roster, right? Because they'll draft a guy too, because they need 3 camp arms. So they need at least an undrafted rookie to come in and play, which is 1 pick later than what Brock Purdy was last year. And he won the job over Nate Sudfeld, who had some guaranteed dollars on his contract, So, and I've heard people say that they think it's a competition between Trey Lance and Sam Darnold to see what they are. And yes, they are competing. And look, that they could show a lot and really impress the 49ers. And that is definitely possible because they're both really talented guys. But what I was reading between the lines with what John Lynch was saying is they expect Brock Purdy is their best guy, but they're going to let the other guys play. And if they show something that they haven't shown yet in the NFL, then maybe there is a competition, and then maybe there is more to it. But until they see that, those guys are 2 and 3 on the 49ers depth chart. And
Okay, gotcha.
I think they're open to listening to offers for Trey Lance. So I don't think that's off the table as well if a team comes calling. But I think it's going to be considerable, and I don't think a team will pay what it would take the 49ers to move off of Trey Lance either.
And then that's a totally different conversation because there's always going to be that. And again, we talked about it with Trey Lance, right? Like as a starter, the moment things kind of look a little weird, what is everybody going to do? They're going to go to, hey, well, Jimmy Garoppolo. Why don't you have Jimmy Garoppolo playing? Now with Brock Purdy, let's say you have him out there and week 1, he's a little rusty. It looks a little weird. What are the grumblings going to start being? Well, in week 2, if it does, right? And if you kind of saw how some of the last few games of the season with Brock Purdy, they got a little weird at times, and then I thought he rebounded well and was able to kind of overcome some of his kind of weirder moments, I guess you could say, right? But you watch him against the Cowboys, and maybe it's just the Cowboys' defense was terrific, but when you start to see him against like what people consider a top defense, it started to get a little weird. So, is there a chance that something like that happens out the gate? Then now all of a sudden, because you have Trey Lance, you don't really give, and they probably will, but Brock Purdy what he needs, which is, hey man, this is just some adversity he has to play through. And now people, his elbow, maybe he's not healthy. Then you got Trey Lance standing there. Then every time something goes wrong, they're gonna pan the camera to Trey Lance. And those are the things that you deal with when, like you said, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none.
And you can't be flip-flopping, and that's the worst thing for it. You have to have a guy that is the guy. If he's healthy, he's the guy, and he's playing. And the only reason the other guy would be not playing is if the other guy's hurt. And the 49ers don't quite have that. More on that, Croc, what it could look like as you get towards the regular season here with Brock Purdy, with a little Trey Lance, with a little Sam Darnold mixed in as well with this training camp. Quarterback competition, as some are calling it, next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The tournament heating up, and tourney time is the best time to get in on the action at FanDuel because right now, new users are getting a $1,000 no sweat first bet. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. All you have to do if you're a new customer, go to FanDuel.com/locked on and sign up today to claim your no sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money lines to the point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net in the NCAA tournament. Of course, NBA getting close to the playoffs and fighting for seeding there, NHL as well, and Major League Baseball getting going this week. All on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, Croc. So you brought up something that I think is interesting, and this is really the path for Trey Lance to be the starter for the 49ers. And that is the true 6-month timeline for Brock Purdy, where he doesn't take a snap in any team drills or any preseason games. Like maybe, he's throwing, but he's not practicing with the 49ers, right? And even if he gets cleared before week 1, if Trey Lance does have an opportunity to compete here to show that you're not just going to throw Brock Purdy in, that Trey Lance has grown, right? And that all these reps in the offseason.
And real quick, and I know you're about to land your plane, but the growth, I don't think it has to be a huge jump for him.
Right. He's shown some things in NFL games too. He hasn't had an opportunity to play as many games as Brock Purdy has. And clearly they like something about Brock Purdy that we don't see that happens every day in practice, which I think is a big part of this and nobody really talks about. They're not basing everything on just 7 games of Brock Purdy. They're basing it on the entire year with Brock Purdy, seeing all of his practice reps and his game reps, being around him in meeting rooms, seeing how he works, seeing how he interacts with teammates, seeing how Trey Lance over the course of 2 years works every day, is around teammates, how he practices every day, and how that growth has gone. And they liked enough of Trey Lance, partially probably because they sunk so much into him. They gave him the opportunity last year to be the starter, and he unfortunately got hurt and didn't have an opportunity to play through that last season. And then here comes Brock Purdy and plays so well that it's hard to undo that. And they've seen that, and they know what they have in Brock Purdy now, and maybe are less sure about what they have in Trey Lance. But if Trey Lance is a more tooled up human being. He's bigger, he's faster. There is some quick twitch to Brock Purdy getting around in the pocket, but Trey Lance is a more talented physically human being than Brock Purdy is. Everybody knows that. That's why one guy was the last pick in the draft, one guy was the third pick in the draft. And he's a smart kid and high character guy. You know, you would think that if he can get through this adversity, and we've seen players do this before, where you get older and you develop. Now the last part is playing. And does he start to play really well in preseason games? Does he carry himself like a leader throughout the offseason, right? And the 49ers might be sitting there on August 24th being like, man, Trey Lance put together a really good camp, and he's even better than he was last year. And last year he was better than he was as a rookie, right? So he's growing. Let's let him play. So Brock Purdy, not cleared yet, or maybe just barely gets cleared. And they're like, well, let's not activate him quite yet. Let's be for sure with Brock Purdy and let Trey Lance play now regular season games. And then what if Trey Lance plays in the regular season for week 1, week 2, week 3, and he's playing good? I don't think you can go back. Because what he could give you,
you can't do that though.
What he could give you is so much better than Brock Purdy, and that's why I'm saying it's really weird to hear John Lynch say that about Brock Purdy, because I think there's enough space there for Trey Lance to just blow that out of the water and say, no, I'm too talented. You can't go with this noodle arm dude coming off of elbow surgery and put him in there instead of me, because of how good I am and how great I could possibly be.
It's just tough because you want them to commit to one guy, and that's what he's doing. It's just tough for the tough thing, and we'll dive more into the whole Trey Lance dynamic in a later episode, but the tough thing is I don't think we've seen a situation like this before. Or we just haven't. With a guy that just need to play, and then, well, he about to play, then he got hurt, and then, you know, it's just, and then another guy comes in who's the last pick in the draft, and it's like, man, he played very well. Okay, we're just going to stick with him. You know, it just doesn't happen like that typically. Like, you could make a movie about it, and the movie wouldn't play out that way. People are like, oh, this is just a movie. Mm-hmm. You know? So it's hard to kind of fathom it in the situation, but for Brock Purdy right now, again, I think he's in the driver's seat, as Kyle Shanahan alluded to. The tough thing is his elbow. And I saw someone in the chat say, well, how do you know he's not going to lose velocity? How do you know it's going to heal 100%? They're banking on that. You know, and I think it's just tough coming out here right now, this early in the offseason, and then making those comments, even though I do agree, I like the fact that they're getting behind someone, but then you're getting behind somebody that can't go out there. And now you have another guy. And does he feel like if I'm Trey Lance, do I just feel like, man, why? I don't really have a true chance, right? Like, that was the thing. I mean, we talked about that a month ago. Like, not having a real opportunity.
And a lot of this is exactly what we thought. We just hadn't heard John Lynch say it, right?
Right.
And now we've heard John Lynch say it. And it's easy for us to sit back and say, well, you should say this, you shouldn't say this. But we kind of all know what the score is. We know exactly what it is. We laid out exactly what this is, but we just now got to hear John Lynch say it today, that Brock Purdy played the best ball that we've seen for the 49ers at quarterback in the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era. And if he was healthy, he'd be taking the first reps in OTAs. And now he's not going to because he's hurt. But I think there is a tight enough gap that Trey Lance should be able to close it.
My thing with that, and he has played the best.
Well, hold on, Croc.
I know what the best. Like, what is the best quarterbacking for the 49ers? People have, for years, were talking about how Jimmy Garoppolo, man, he wins these games. But when you're watching, you're like, well, it's not really Jimmy, right? So, like, I feel like the standard or the baseline for the 49ers to, like, have this really good quarterback, we've lowered the bar so much because of how good and everybody is around them. And then when you watch Brock Purdy and some of the things, like, if you were just to watch kind of like a highlight, you could watch his highlights and think, damn, this tight end is really good, who's catching a 10-yard pass and taking it for 50. damn, this guy Brandon Ayuk is really good catching a 8-yard out route and taking it down the sideline. Damn, Brock Purdy threw the ball downfield to two guys who are wide open fighting for the ball because there's no defenders around them, right? So even though it's like the best quarterbacking that the 49ers have had, it's like, what is the standard for that?
It wasn't amazing. It was just like a tick better than, less turnover-y than Jimmy Garoppolo was showing us, right? And Jimmy G had a nice little run with the 49ers last year as well before he got hurt. So here's the thing I would say about Trey Lance, and I'll talk a little bit more about some other things here in a second and where Sam Darnold fits in and all this. And there's another quarterback, by the way, out there, Croc, that has requested a trade in the NFL if we want to get this even more dramatic with the San Francisco 49ers quarterback. Okay, you say, okay, you want to have a starter, you want to have clarity. Brock Purdy,
Ideally,
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you telling me that if Trey Lance shows them that he's the dude that they thought they were trading up to draft at number 3 overall in 2021, shows them that this summer, that it's better for him to say, but we said it's Purdy, so guess what? Now it's Purdy's job. You can't do
Well,
that.
that's the dilemma that they're in.
He's the next Josh Allen.
That's the dilemma that they're in. Look, you just mentioned Josh Allen, right? And I saw somebody in the chat say, if Brock Purdy were drafted as high as Lance, or maybe Lance was drafted like Brock Purdy, right? Like Brock Purdy had to make the team. He had to be out subfield. If Lance had to do those same things, he probably wouldn't have done that, right? Like maybe he's not even on the team or he's a practice squad quarterback. You never know. The tough thing is watching Josh Allen the first 2 years. You could say something similar. I'm not saying he's going to be Josh, but just the development for certain guys is just different, especially for one guy who we know needs it, right? Like we know Lance needed this. So although maybe it wasn't great, you kind of look for the silver linings and things that he does well, and then how do we build on those things and how does he progress from year to year? He just hasn't had that chance. He has, but hasn't, right? It's just a weird dynamic. I mean, I think we could talk about this the entire offseason and kind of spin in a bunch of different ways. But ultimately, what Purdy did was enough for John to say those things today. It feels premature based on the situation, but ideally that is what you would like him to do.
Croc, do you golf?
I do not golf.
Okay.
No, I need to.
Well,
I don't golf. I don't golf because I can't put the time in that I know it takes to be good at golfing.
Yeah, and it takes time. And even when you put the time in, it's the most difficult sport to get good at. Even if you put the time in that you should be better, and you are not. And it's a frustrating and addicting sport. And John Lynch golfs. He used a golfing analogy talking about Brock Purdy being a leader in the clubhouse. I want to break down that analogy further next and talk about where Sam Darnold fits into this and see how you read the Sam Darnold part of this equation with the San Francisco 49ers quarterbacks going into 2023 next. I do want to thank everybody for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you check out the brand new Locked On NFL Scouting podcast with the draft dudes. You know, the draft dudes, Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino. They're also the hosts respectively of Locked On Dolphins and Locked On Bills. They do great stuff. They're going to be talking draft, free agency, team building every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, you got to check out the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, as well as the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show coming at you daily right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, Croc. John Lynch said that Brock Purdy is the leader in the clubhouse. John Lynch did not say Brock Purdy is our starting quarterback. He is QB1. He is the starter of the San Francisco 49ers. He said he's the leader in the clubhouse. Do you know what that term means, Croc?
I do not.
So the leader in the clubhouse in a golf tournament is the guy who finished his round and he has the highest score. So he's leading. But there's other golfers still finishing their round that could have a better round than he had and end up with a score that's better than that guy's score and then win the golf tournament. So the leader in the clubhouse means you have the best score right now. That doesn't mean the tournament's over and you've won the golf tournament and you're putting on the green jacket, right? So while Brock Purdy's the leader in the clubhouse, he's also got a bionic elbow and he can't fit that arm through that green jacket right now. So there is an opportunity for Trey Lance to go do something and win that job. That's the other part of this that I think should not get lost is if John Lynch is truly meaning the leader in the clubhouse analogy of the golf tournament's not over, but one guy's got to lead, and that's Brock Purdy. And so we'll see what that looks like for the rest of the round for Trey Lance and Sam Darnold. Some people took – I did not take it.
Hold on, Peacock. I got something to say to that.
Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, and I think most people that don't know what you just said, that analogy with leader in the clubhouse, if you kind of like dig deep, and if that isn't in fact what he means, he did also say, based on 2022, he's gonna earn that so I get what you're saying. Like, it's just like, hey, he is ahead, and he's earned the ability to be the first one to take snaps if all things were created equal, but that's not what it is. So that kind of changes. Gosh, it kind of changed. I don't know why you didn't lead with that, because it kind of changes the way I kind of view it. Again, essentially, we understand this. Everyone in the chat that's in there right now, like, they understand what this is. It's Purdy's job to lose. That's very clear. But when you hear him and you're seeing the reports out there, and everybody's viewing it as Brock Purdy is the starter once he comes back, and then you kind of throw out there the whole leader in the clubhouse thing, and now it's like, well, he kind of is until he isn't. If somebody else kind of finishes ahead of where he get. Now, again, can you finish ahead of where he finished without playing a regular season game? I think the answer to that is no. So then there's that aspect of it as well.
Ramble On in the live chat says, what if Purdy comes back and his arm is like the kid in Rookie of the Year? I don't know if you remember that 90s movie, Croc, but it's fantastic. Henry Roland Gardner was the character, I believe. Yeah. And so that's the other unknown in this too. Purdy might just have the noodlest noodle ever when he comes back, or maybe he's just not quite strong enough 5-6 months in to be playing a game. Maybe he doesn't need 7 months to really be like, okay, now I'm comfortable to be in a game. And right now he's just got that, and I think I might have it. I wonder if I could share the screen here with the photo. You're breaking up a little bit, Croc. I don't know if it's just on my end or if it's breaking up for everybody, but I can't hear what you're saying right now. I think you're frozen as well. Might have a little internet issues. I don't think it's my internet issue. I had internet issues last week. It was driving me crazy. I think those are fixed. Croc is, I believe in Atlanta, Georgia is where Croc is at this moment. Oh, there we go. Okay, you're moving again.
All right, cool. My bad.
You back, Croc? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, you're back. No, I take it back. You're gone again. Robo Crocky, as they said in the chat. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about Sam Darnold and what that looks like and his part in the competition, if it is truly a competition for the San Francisco 49ers at quarterback. But real quick on the note about Purdy and his arm. Yeah, he could come back like Rookie of the Year. And a lot of people do come back with this sort of a surgery. They come back a little bit stronger because of all the rehab work that they do, and they strengthen all the muscles around the joint. And that joint is supposed to be, with this surgery, come back 100% and not have any any lasting effects. It's a strong ligament, and now everything around that arm, because of the rehab process, is actually stronger than it was before. So some people come back throwing stronger, but some people don't come back and bounce back the same way. And so we'll see what kind of arm Brock Purdy has when he comes back. If his arm comes back a tick stronger, now you're really cooking with what Brock Purdy could be. But I don't think he has a lot left to lose either if his arm doesn't come back stronger. So that'll be a factor too. And the 49ers are going to have to monitor that and figure that out. And they can't let him, even if he's quote unquote cleared, they can't let him come back unless he's 100% back to the guy he was. And it'll be hard to knock off that rust so quickly if he's not able to play a part in training camp for the 49ers. And then the part he plays in training camp is also up in the air, because 6 months from surgery, and 6 months has kind of been the timeline we've talked about, and that's been dropped by all the doctors and everyone talking about this surgery all along. The 6 month time frame puts the 49ers right at kickoff. I mean, the exact 6 month timeline from when he had his surgery is the Sunday of week 1 that the 49ers kick off this season. Now, if he can come back in 5 months, then you have an opportunity to participate a little bit in training camp and maybe play some preseason games. Croc is back with us, and you're looking clear now, Croc. So one question I have with Brock Purdy in the rehab, Croc, is, of course, we don't know what it's going to look like in his arm health and strength when he comes back, or when exactly it is. The question I have is, after the 12 weeks, the 3 months where he can start throwing, and that's when John Lynch said they'll know a lot more after those first 12 weeks. Between that point and the 6-month timeline we've heard about, how much throwing can he do, and how much can he participate? Can he be a participant in training camp even before he's quote unquote cleared? Because he will be able to throw. When he's able to throw before he's cleared, is that just throwing on the side like we saw with Jimmy Garoppolo last training camp? Or is he actually going to be able to get in there and do some reps in practice at camp, which would really make it a lot easier for the 49ers to have seen him throughout camp, even if he wasn't cleared and he wasn't doing contact drills or anything like that, or even playing in preseason games. As long as they saw him going through the reps and throwing the football and like the way the ball's coming out of his hand and he's getting all those reps and he's a part of practice in some way, that's a big question I have. Can he practice before he's cleared on a limited basis? And that would make their decision a lot easier to plug him back in at week 1, even if he doesn't play any preseason games.
Yeah, definitely you can. Being cleared is, there's different levels to it, right? There's, hey, okay, he's now cleared to practice. I think when people talk about the 6-month timeline, it's cleared to play in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But up until that point, he'll be clear for different things. There's going to be a time where he's clear for 7-on-7. And there's going to be a time, or individual drills, right? Like indies, throw the ball on air, and then he'll be clear for 7-on-7. Then he'll be clear for team, and they'll probably scale back, and he won't be full go. He'll be a limited participant, maybe getting like a few snaps here and there, and then ultimately he'll be full go. And they hope that that's by week 1. So they hope to week 1 is here. He's been building up to this. Week 1 now he is cleared to play in the actual game. So that's why when people were talking about like, oh, his arm and things like that, well, like that 3-month period is for him to ramp up to that point. Like they're saying 6 months, he is 100% full go. And they're hoping right now for training camp, he's like ready to start throwing in training camp to like moving receivers, routes on the air, 7-on-7, those type of things. Right. And then a couple weeks later, it's like, all right, he's full go now.
Right. That'll be huge. However much he's able to do during camp, even if it's not 100%. RDC says, let's talk prospects, 6th round defensive tackles over quarterbacks. We're not quite there today, but we're going to dive way back into the prospects later on this week. I want to talk tomorrow about Lamar Jackson. Could that potentially still be on the table? Could there still be a trade in the works for the San Francisco 49ers after Lamar officially announced that he's requested a trade from the Baltimore Ravens? And could Trey Lance potentially be on the trade block? We'll get into that on Winky Wednesday tomorrow. Real quick, Croc, did you get the same read on it I did about Sam Darnold? Because I've seen a lot of people out there that say that Lynch said it's Sam Darnold and Trey Lance competing and that they're kind of even going into this, where to me it felt like Sam Darnold was an afterthought in some of these conversations. And looking at what his contract was, it felt clear to me that Trey Lance is going to be getting the first reps as long as he's cleared and he's healthy in OTAs. And then Lance and Sam Darnold is sort of the veteran safety net in all of this. And it's not so much a competition right now between Lance and Sam Darnold if Purdy's not ready for week 1.
I think ultimately with that, and how I kind of explained to some of my buddies on Twitter, was that part of it is all on Trey Lance. Really, a lot of this is on Trey Lance. If you come out and you're prepared and you just do well, then you don't have to worry about Sam Darnold. But if you're just super hit and miss and you look like there's just too much, then you 100% open the door for Sam Darnold. And that's just a natural football progression. Like, that's the way I would see it if I were a coach. All right, man, we got him. Like, okay, let's see. Okay, it looks good. Fine. Okay, Sam Darnold, just play your role. And Sam Darnold will be fine with playing his role, whatever that is. But if you open up the door for him to, or you leave that door cracked because you're just inconsistent, then that's when you'll be in trouble. I'm curious to see, we talk about being inconsistent, and part of Trey Lance, especially in training camp, kind of like up and down practices, how good the defense was. How are the other defenses, especially like, let's say Brock Purdy, like now, okay, you get all the first team snaps, but you got to go up against Bosa and Armstead and all these other guys that the 49ers got, right? I mean, new big paid, highly paid defensive tackle. Like, that's a lot different than going up against like third string every day.
The range of outcomes for Trey Lance in 2023 and his entire career is bonkers. It's such a wide range of potential outcomes of what Trey Lance could be. And I can't wait for it. It's going to be a really fun offseason. It's going to be frustrating because of as we've seen, it's like sort of the Lord of the Flies thing when it comes to everyone's going to pick their favorite. There's going to be people that think Darnold is a big thing for the 49ers. There's going to be people that are just Team Purdy no matter what because they've seen his play and they believe he should be the guy. Then there's still people who believe in Trey Lance. And I don't know what the really pro and really anti-Garoppolo folks are going to do and where they're going to line up now with Jimmy G not around and being part of it. So there's some free agent fans out there to latch on to their favorite quarterback as well. So no doubt it's going to be an interesting offseason, and we'll see what happens with the Purdy timeline and if anything changes there. But right now it's an opportunity for Trey Lance and Sam Darnold to prove they are something in Kyle Shanahan's offense. And tomorrow, Croc and I are going to be back with Nick Winkler, our weekly guest, a Winky Wednesday episode here on Locked On 49ers. Really appreciate everybody making us your first listen every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you're subscribed up to Locked On NFL Scouting, Locked On NFL Draft, and the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.